Welcome back to another episode of The Gentleman's Journey. We're here in Minneapolis, Minnesota at the 183rd Convention. I'm here with Bill Stevens. I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, so what Jack said is absolutely correct. My name is Bill Stevens. I graduated from the University of Oregon, Eta Delta, in 1972 and got there in 1968. Held a number of positions while at the lodge, including number one, and have been extremely active with the alumni base for 30 plus years.
Very cool. We're glad to have you here. It's always fun to get back together during the summer for convention. This is my first one, and it's been a blast so far. I always like to start at the beginning, kind of the Chi Psi experience. What was your first experience with Chi Psi?
So I was born and raised in San Francisco, and consequently at that time, San Francisco was on a semester system.
Okay.
And so I graduated in January and came up to the University of Oregon in spring of '68 and lived in the dorm for that quarter and then moved into the lodge. But I rushed a number of fraternities, and I think what's typical with the lodges across the country is, there's just a very special, warm, and inviting feeling that was different than what I had experienced at some of the other fraternities. I had friends who asked me to rush, DUs as an example, Theta Chi's, and quite honestly, I can't remember what took me to the lodge. But I got there, and that's all it took.
Yeah. The rest is history.
The rest is history.
That's kind of similar experience here. Yeah. Now we're Minneapolis with a bunch of brothers. It's a good time.
Yes.
Obviously, you're very involved in alumni, coming back to conventions, and involved as well with the local Alpha Oregon. What keeps you coming back every year to Chi Psi?
Well, it's more than every year. It's being actively involved. My experience it's not unique, but I guess I'm the personality type that once I commit to something, I'm there in this particular case for life. My experience was different than many in that I have my brother who's a Chi Psi at Oregon. My three sons were Chi Psi's at Oregon.
Wow.
My brother-in-law was my wife's brother, was a Chi Psi at Oregon, and his son, my nephew, was a Chi Psi at Oregon. So I got the pleasure of initiating all of them, and it was quite unique and profound experiences for each one.
Very cool. I know I had Dr. Dan on here earlier today, and he mentioned his two sons were Chi Psi's as well. Does that mean just a lot to you? Do you think you had some pull to take them in as well?
Well, as it relates to my brother and my three sons, they knew the experience that I had because I had brothers that I kept in communication with. We visited with each other. We talked to each other. So they knew the experience as well as the Oregon experience.
Okay.
And between my wife's family and my family, we have over 25 ducks.
Wow.
So the Oregon experience was a natural,
Uh-huh.
and the Chi Psi experience happened pretty organically.
Very cool. It's a cool full circle moment, I'm sure. You're involved with Alpha Eta Delta's local alumni organization, as you said. How important are local alumni to the success of an Alpha?
Well, I think they're critically important. We have three boards. The Alumni Advisory Board, which I'm a part of, the Educational Foundation, which I'm a part of, and the corporation, which owns the physical asset, which I'm a part of. And at my age, I'm, with my experiences with the lodge, I'm kind of seen as, the person that has a lot of history and can provide that. So I would say that the Alumni Advisory Board is probably one of the more critical in that we have a very active board. I think we have 13 members, and they span 5 generations. So younger guys, middle-aged guys. I'm the oldest, unfortunately. And each one of us mentor an exec committee member at the lodge. And we meet monthly via Zoom because many of the board members are spread out throughout the United States. Do you know Francis Howard?
I do not.
Okay, well, Francis is an alumnus, and he lives in Hoboken,
Okay.
New Jersey. So
that's some distance from Oregon.
yeah. So consequently, we meet once a month, and then at the off period, we meet with each exec committee member individually, and it allows us to keep in touch with them, to provide a historical perspective, to provide perspective as it relates to how to run the lodge, and more importantly, I think it develops a sense of trust between the alumni, no matter what age, and the active membership, the exec committee in particular. And that's hard to build, but if you do it organically and have an interest in them and the lodge, I think it really pays dividends.
Sure has. It's cool to see how alumni evolve with their relationships over the years. You mentioned the advisory board. Can you explain what the other 2 boards are in charge of?
So the corporation is the entity that owns the physical asset.
Okay.
And we have a board member, the president, Dave Waterfall, who happens to live in Eugene. We have a unique situation where we don't have a lot of guys that live in Eugene. And they're not they're not active. And the alumni base predominantly is situated in Portland.
Okay.
Thankfully, Dave moved from Utah to Eugene in his job. He works remotely. And he handled the major renovation that we did in 2000. Well, it really started in 17 to 19.
Okay.
And he acted as the general contractor. I did one in 2000, and I acted as basically the general on that one. But fortunately, Dave lives in Eugene, and so he's actually our advisor.
Okay.
I mean, I act as one too.
Yeah.
The advisory board does in some capacity or another. But Dave is there literally, 3 times a week. We're both there for initiations, plus other alumni who choose to come down to Eugene.
Very cool. Nice. You mentioned the renovations. I had a note in here actually that there were some major renovations that you were a part of. Can you walk us through some of those?
Yeah, that one was the one I was involved with was in 2000, and literally the day the kids moved out, we were in there pounding walls.
Wow.
We took everything down to the studs. We rewired, recabled, fire life safety, reorganized spaces, just a ton of work, a new roof, painting. And we had a bunch of alumni who came down on weekends. We had one alumnus who stayed there the entire summer and did nothing but work on the multitude of original wooden windows. Reglaze them, new glass, new glazing, paint. So it was a major project, and it took all summer. We weren't finished until the day they moved in.
Wow. Cutting along at the last second. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
As an Alpha Phi Delta brother, we're a newer Alpha, so we don't have many alumni that are well established in their careers and have more of a firm setting of where their life is heading. What advice would you give to younger Alphas like Alpha Phi Delta or Purdue to maintain a good relationship with those alumni?
Well, it has to come from within, in my opinion. I tell the guys all the time, if you have to pull or push somebody to do something, it's really not the right guy.
Yeah.
So it has to be organic, and it has to be guys that really are committed more than just having had their association with the lodge while they were in school. I think that communication is a critical component. We found that out when not only did we do the renovation, we kind of did it backwards. We had a good friend of mine who, on this last renovation,
Okay.
a good friend of mine, we knew we had to do the renovation. The university asked us to leave for a year. And we had that alumnus who said, what do you need to do the renovation? And it started out at $400,000, and we went back to him and said, we need another 150, and by the time it was done, it was $900,000 that he fronted.
Wow.
And when we did the capital campaign, part of that we raised was to pay for the renovation.
Okay.
The second part of it was to raise an endowment so that we could provide scholarships, awards annually for scholastics, leadership, community service, and philanthropy.
Okay.
So, to answer your question, I think, and what we found there was that I was the campaign chair, and I talked to hundreds of guys, and many of them said, well, we haven't heard from anybody. We don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So communication is where I was getting to. Communication is really a critical factor in keeping people abreast of what's happening at the lodge. So I think it starts there.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I've also heard stories from 8 adopted brothers that I've met here just at convention the past couple of days of Puma, the athletic company, being in the lodge in some capacity. Can you explain that? I didn't fully understand what was the situation.
I think you're well aware that Eugene has an unbelievable track and field, not only facility but department. And the World Track and Field Championships were held in 22.
Okay.
And it's a 2-week event. And all of these major clothing manufacturers needed space. And so we had 3 companies come to us and say, hey, could we rent your facility for that 2-week period? It actually was 3 by the time they in and out. And they came in, so we negotiated, and we took the highest bidder, which was Puma.
Okay.
And Puma created the Puma House. And, they took all the furniture out and redecorated it. It was really a cool experience. And they used it to house some of their special guests.
Okay.
And they had the Puma athletes come over. The athletes weren't housed there. But they utilized the lodge as their central organizational facility to accommodate all the promotional activities that they did.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
From the conversation I had, it just sounded like a storage space, but no, it's a main marketing component, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so they bought 34 new mattresses.
Wow.
All the bedding, which ultimately they left for us.
New bedding for everyone.
Yeah.
That's
And it was it was more than $50,000 by the time you counted the food and beverage component that we had for them.
Wow, that's super cool.
Yeah.
Transitioning to some advice for undergrads and young professionals that are entering the workforce soon, what advice would you have for them?
Well, I think whether they understand it or not, I think that the lodge experience, the confined space experience with all different types of people, backgrounds, ethnicities, religious beliefs, political beliefs, I think that whether they believe it or not, and I tell them this, that's one of the greatest opportunities that they will have had, and that they will understand when they leave the college experience, because it teaches you how to deal with people. It teaches you that everybody's got a different button. And if you're ultimately going to be a leader, and if you're going to lead people, that's where the real rubber meets the road. And that's an experience that, you know, living in a dorm by yourself with another roommate, living in a, you know, in a townhouse with 2 or 3 other guys, it's a lot different when you're, you know, you're in a confined space with 30, 40 guys. It teaches you how to deal with people.
For sure.
And so I would say, take that experience and understand what it is and maximize it. Other than that, you know, I think people that have great interpersonal skills, in my opinion, well, I come from a sales perspective, so I think that that's a great way to enter the world. If you have sales experience, you can do almost anything, no matter what it might be. And I think that that if they utilize those experiences, I think it'll take them a long way.
For sure. And speaking of Dr. Dan again, when he was on here, you mentioned recruitment is just like sales. It's selling someone on an idea and allowing them to buy in and participate in it. So I think that's great advice.
Well, it is, and what's difficult sometimes is to teach, you know, new members exactly what the experience is, and to utilize all of the tools that are available, all of the opportunities that are available, whether it's meeting with alumni, whether it's selling, in our particular case, our academic leadership, you know, philanthropy, community service aspect. Those are things that I don't think many individual fraternities or sororities offer. The national fraternities might, and this national fraternity, I can't remember what the number is, but they offer, I think it's at least $250,000, if not upwards to $350,000 a year in scholarships. And so we do that. We, in the last 3 years, you know, we've handed out over $50,000, about $17,000 to $20,000 a year to the guys at the annual birthday banquet in May.
That's serious money.
Yeah.